Hello and welcome to the latest EnvCast episode. EnvCast is a Society for the Environment podcast, bringing you environmental professionals in conversation each month. Each episode is designed to provide insight into the life of registered environmental professionals, featuring experts from across a wide range of sectors and disciplines. We explore what they do, why they do it, how they got to where they are now, and their future ambitions. Each guest has verified their environmental credentials by achieving Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner, or Registered Environmental Technician registration. To learn more about the Society for the Environment or our environmental registrations, please visit socenv.org.uk. That's SocEnv.org.uk. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to this month's EnvCast episode. My name is Phil Underwood, the Engagement Manager here at the Society for the Environment. Today, I am pleased to be joined by an award-winning Chartered Environmentalist. Amongst other awards, Lara Young was the 2021 winner of our very own Registrant Newcomer of the Year award. So thank you very much for joining us, Lara.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. So I'm very much looking forward to learning about your career so far and your future plans. And as with all of our EnvCast episodes, I'm going to hand straight over to you to give us a bit of a flavour of what you currently do in your job and other commitments around that.
Yeah, so as Costain's Climate Change Director, essentially a big part of my role is to help shape and set out exactly what is the organisation's intentions around addressing climate change. So not just net zero, but the wider agenda around biodiversity, natural capital, etc., and weaving that in, working with other colleagues to help bring that to life. So a big part of my role is mapping out and making sure what we set out is ambitious, but also realistic. And then it's kind of twofold. So one piece is setting out the plan. What do we need to do? How do we get there? Really being sort of the conscious and ensuring the business is really moving in that direction and taking the steps it needs to. And the second part of that is, and probably the bigger part of my role, is bringing that strategy to life. So having the intention of doing it, setting out and mapping it out is wonderful, but really the big part of it is really following through, making sure that those steps are taken and progress is driven. And so I've got a nice balance between strategy and delivery, really.
Interesting. So how much of your role is internally focused at Costain and their activities, and how does it go beyond that to clients and so on?
Yeah, very much so. So we've set out a plan, so our climate change action plan, which is addressing our scope 1, 2 and 3 footprint. So very much actually a huge part, or the biggest proportion, over 3/4 of our targets are actually targets that we cannot achieve without our supply chain and our clients and working with them to get there. So there is an internal facet of focusing on ensuring that the business is set up in order to achieve that. But a big part of our plan, and the majority of it, is really working externally of shaping this. Like many other organisations, a big part of our footprint and our whole emissions actually sits outside of our direct control. So the focus is very much actually driving the biggest scale of change possible, and therefore that means helping drive and spearhead the influence in the right direction and delivering on that. So yeah, okay. It is very much a balance.
Well, that sounds like a variety of things that you get your hands into. So on a day-to-day basis, who are the kind of people you're talking to, and what are you trying to influence them, or how does that work?
So it really is varied, and there's no real 2 days that are the same. But some of the key stakeholders I engage with, and this is both internally but also external design partners. So design is a really big part of that. So really ensuring that we've set out and established what the intentions are of a project, or what we're setting out, especially the early concept design. So big piece of it is around designers and everyone involved in that space. So in addition to procurement and commercial, so ensuring actually, getting a design and getting the idea of what's being designed or engineered is one thing, but also ensuring that the contracts we set up, or how we're incentivizing everyone to deliver this or design this and achieve that, also aligns with those objectives. So a big part of my role is joining up all of those dots between those different disciplines. In addition to that, externally working with a number of institutions, so Society for Environment, IEMA, the ICE, around policy changes, consultation, working with BEIS, etc., to help shape what I suppose the requirements of tomorrow need to be, or where we currently are, areas to improve, what we need to do more of, etc. So it really is quite a nice array of different stakeholders that I engage with quite frequently.
There's a lot of things going on there. Is that just, have you got a team, or is it just you? Because I mean, Costain's not a small organisation.
No, certainly not. And I definitely can't take credit for everything we're doing. There's a huge amount of effort that's done. You know, a lot of this could not be done without everyone playing a part. So there is a massive thank you to everyone in the business, but also our external parties and stakeholders, clients, etc. So yeah, definitely, this is a massive team effort. In terms of a team, the way that it's structured is actually what we've noticed is actually I help shape the vision of where we need to do and the narrative around that and how we're going to get there. But actually the support on where we've established to look to grow the team is really with the contracts and at delivery. So locally integrating sustainability or carbon experts within those delivery teams or design teams to help ensure that actually they're on the ground really working with every other sort of discipline to make that happen. So it's not necessarily growing a massive team for myself at a central level, but actually really spreading that across every contract so that they're supported and have the relevant expertise to drive it and own it locally. I would add to that, actually, sorry.
Carry on.
If I can.
Yeah. So
yeah, if I can add to that, in addition to that, there is also a big part is we don't need an army of environmental and carbon experts. There certainly is a need for them. I'm not denying that, but there is also a big focus of making sure that all the other disciplines are very clear on exactly what it means for them, what do they need to do. So a big part of our role is actually educating and making sure, and also holding to account other disciplines and making sure everyone plays their part in this. So it's kind of a mixed balance of specialists, but also generalizing or making net zero and climate change accessible to everyone, democratizing it, I guess, is probably the best way of saying it.
So there's a big leadership element there, which is clearly part from a SocEnv point of view. Part of becoming a chartered environmentalist is being able to show that leadership and being able to influence others. So I would assume that's exactly what you've mentioned there, really. Does that sound about right?
Yes. Yeah, very much. Leadership, demonstrating, leading by example, and then supporting where needed. So understanding the different levels of maturity, certainly in those topics, to really shape the approach has been key, yeah.
Sounds fantastic. It's worth noting at this point that we're both obviously working at home. Lara has some builders next door, and I have a 2-year-old running around downstairs. So if there's any background noise, bear with us. But we shall persevere. Hopefully, the audio is holding up nicely. So, in terms of your current role, what were the requirements for you to be able to apply for that? Did you need any specific qualifications to get to your group climate change director role?
I wouldn't say there was a prerequisite in a certain qualification. However, it was very much more on the testament of what had been achieved so far. A big part of this role is, the joining up of bringing a strategy into fruition and actually making that a reality. And a key part of, I think, being able to access this role was the fact that I had demonstrable examples of where I've done that, even whether it was on smaller projects, but being able to really tangibly demonstrate where I'd set out plans, how I'd brought them to life, and be able to evidence that with sort of clear, explicit examples of where that was key. So it was more on the experience and evidence to date as opposed to a qualification in particular.
And I imagine part of that is demonstrating how you can overcome challenges. What kind of challenges do you face in your role, whether it's day to day or every now and again or whatever it might be?
There are some potentially a few technical challenges, and that's more a reflection of people's understanding or knowledge in the space, especially as the whole sustainability agenda is very much emerging. It's also can be a little bit victim of its very fashionable topic at the moment, huge amount of interest, which is brilliant. But that doesn't mean everyone is at the same pace in terms of where we're currently at. They're understanding what that actually means. So actually one of the biggest challenges is distilling and really balancing out the message so that everyone is on the same page. Another one is also shaping perception. So it's kind of linked to this challenge of the maturity of understanding the topic. therefore could inform the wrong or potentially projects that are really nice to do, but not necessarily the necessary things to do or the needs to do. And so really helping shape people's objectives and where they'd like to go, but not necessarily dampen their ambition to do so. So a lot of it is involving is redirecting is actually probably one of the greatest challenges, I would say. In addition to the complexity around I work in quite a diverse value chain across the entirety of sort of engineering and construction. There are a huge different number of layers of organisations, specialisms, etc. So joining up all of those dots is also probably one of the key challenges. Consistency in the messaging and clarity of what is needing to be done is really key in unlocking that. But yeah, they're probably the two greatest challenges I face pretty much daily, to be fair.
But in terms of the messaging and the communication side of things, which we've mentioned a few times now, you do a reasonable amount of speaking at events. Is the purpose behind that to spread that message of the challenges and how you can overcome them and what the opportunities are? What is that part of your Costain role, to spread that knowledge wider?
Yeah, certainly. There's a part of the role which is to demonstrate and to communicate and showcase what we're doing and the progress we're making. We have a very clear objective around really wanting to help lead the UK's clean growth strategy and be one of at the forefront of that. So in order to help that, we totally recognise 3/4 of our targets, I think I mentioned it before, we cannot achieve without our supply chain and our clients also coming to the party and helping us achieve that. So therefore, we've got no interest in really just keeping it to ourselves. A big part of this is making it very clear, very simply. And I'm quite keen, or certainly try to ensure I keep things to as simple as possible. The topics are complex enough as they are. We don't need to overcomplicate them or make them a bit of a dark art, which can be done, especially with jargon, acronyms, a lot of buzzwords. So one of my main aims around this is actually keeping it really simple, plain English. What do we mean? And potentially also mist-butting some of the things, and I'm sure a number of people can appreciate. You can sometimes go to similar events or similar conversations. You always kind of hear the same messaging. A big part of what I'm trying to do is really move the dial away of actually, okay, we can bringing some of those conversations that aren't as easy to have but need to be had in order to progress. So actually, our industry, we know we're not perfect. There's a huge amount we can do. And so really starting to unpick those topics, which is easier said than done, I suppose, because it's not always easy to address some of the paradoxes in the industry or some of the things that we need to really change in order to get there. But fundamentally, I believe in one of the big parts of that role is, well, actually, we have to address that in order to move forward. So it's not shying away, even if it's not easy. So they're the key reasons.
There's a lot of key reasons. That's good. That makes a lot of sense. And I guess thinking quite simplistically, the more people you speak to and educate about being more environmentally focused, whatever that might be, and in terms of Costain's long-term plans to reduce carbon emissions and that kind of thing, I assume that the more people outside of the organization that you work with that know about this stuff and implement this stuff means that you can work with different people because of their focus on their environmental outputs, essentially. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, definitely. There is a big piece around actually helping to diversify the types of people that get involved in these projects, even the appreciation of how much we have an opportunity to impact. And, the focus is, carbon's been mentioned a lot, but it's not the only thing. It's not the be all and end all. It has a big part to play, but it's very much helping to bring that to life. One of my colleagues, Geraint Rowland, does a brilliant job around helping to articulate that around natural capital and biodiversity as well. So, yeah, it very much is trying to bring to the forefront exactly what it is, who else we need to get involved, because actually we don't have all the answers today, and in getting those parties involved in helping figure out some of these solutions is key.
The bigger the pool of people who are able to help in that way, it's got to be a good thing.
Definitely.
It's quite a sweeping question, but do you feel like you're making a difference in your role?
Well, anyone who knows me knows that I am quite driven by that. I'm pretty vocal when I don't feel like I am, or not as much as I could be. So there's highs and lows in any career. There is no denying that, in terms of sometimes you feel like it isn't moving quick enough. We're not doing as much as we could do. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has ever felt like that. But, you know, I also do recognise actually this is a hell of a beast that we are trying to turn around. And although it's not going at the pace that I'd want it to go, and I totally get that, and I think that is what helps fuel me along anyway, we are certainly seeing strides, even in, you know, the conversations being had, the amount of airtime that this topic actually even gets given. The fact that I'm able to be presenting at these events in the first place is in itself a testament. I've been in the industry a number of years, and, you know, certainly seen, not just because the topic's got more attention and more attraction as a subject to discuss, but even the questions you're now being asked, or the how much we want to go into the detail of some of these things. It's not just a sort of superficial covering of environmental and trying to sort of a really broad subject, which is a nice conversation, but doesn't unpick some of the challenges we need to and build on some of the really good things we are already doing. So yeah, I'd say I'd like something to go quicker, and I certainly think there is a balance of making sure that we've set out some great agendas, and that's true for everyone. We need to make sure that we follow through on them. But yeah, I do feel like I am making a difference, even if I'd like to do it quicker if I could.
It's always nice to think you're making a difference. That's a good start. And I must admit, I feel exactly the same way in terms of wanting to do more and more and quicker. And this is going beyond what we plan to talk about, possibly. But in terms of an environmental career and people wanting to go into that space, clearly, I think a lot of people feel the same way that myself and you do, and wanting to do things quicker because of the agenda and because of the importance of what it is. You want things to improve, but I guess that has a bit of a burden on potentially mental health and that kind of thing, because you always feel that pressure to want to do more. Do you feel that in your job?
Certainly. I think I've been lucky potentially in my early career where I think I was a bit more worried that you had to take, you know, a lot more of the responsibility. I had to help try and solve all these problems because I happen to be the environmental expertise. And actually, I've always been relatively comfortable voicing where actually this is all great, but I can't do this alone. And I'm fully cognizant of never really wanting to just be me on my own. If I want to genuinely help, try and make a difference, I need everyone to do that. So I was quite lucky that I've always had that ability to not be too shy to speak up on that front. So I think as I've grown in my career, that's become a lot more apparent, and it's not necessarily always easy to demonstrate that and say that, especially in certain environments and with certain disciplines. But I think it is key to actually, it's sharing the burden around some of this stuff and being very clear of actually no one has all the answers, including me. So therefore, you know, just because I happen to be the expert for that project or, you know, the lead on this doesn't mean that I do know all the answers. So once you take that pressure off, I find actually it takes that weight off and that pressure of, or that sort of that mental anxiety of needing to know everything and what to do. And actually, you know, some of the big first steps of our climate change action plan around, well, actually establishing a very clear roadmap of what are we going to do in certain spaces, because whilst we know the end goal, how do we get there isn't, you know, and it's an industry challenge, it's not just Costain, but being very clear around, well, actually, we need to be vulnerable to accept that we don't have all of the answers here and now. Doesn't mean we can't do things that we do have accessible to us. But yeah, I think if you remove the pressure of actually no one's got the perfect solution, there is no perfect solution, it helps break that down and distill it.
Quite right. But it is quite nice, to be fair, to be in a sector or in a discipline, whatever, however you want to term it, that has such motivation behind it.
Yeah.
Everyone who works in the environment is so motivated to make a difference, and there's a reasonable amount of positivity involved in that. Yes, sometimes it's a bit doom and gloom, but everyone is still trying to make a difference, and it's nice to be in that, around those kind of people. Yeah,
I definitely think that, and another one that actually I forgot to mention, but I think it is key to helping with that balance around the pieces. Even if you potentially get a no or hit a brick wall, or the outcome is not what you wanted, there are multiple ways of getting to that end solution. So a big part of it is I'm by nature very curious. Anyone knows me, I've got about 20 million questions around anything, to be honest. So I think that ability to be able to ask and find another route round, or how we can do it another way, the first, don't take no for an answer, I guess, is probably pretty key. So yes, I'd say
I think asking questions is a key part of development in any role. So it's
very true.
Makes a lot of sense. So you have been with Costain now for over 7 years, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, indeed.
Look, I was on your LinkedIn account earlier, clearly. So, and I think it's fair to say that you, in that time, you've progressed throughout your career with various roles. What's that progression process been like for you?
Yeah, ever changing. In terms of, I'm quite curious by nature, and I was quite eager to be quite well-rounded. I started off as a graduate environmental advisor for Costain, worked on an array of different projects, was quite keen to move sectors, move sort of areas, different types of projects. I could learn as much as possible. And I grew up in France, hadn't worked necessarily on UK infrastructure before, so the environments I'd previously worked in were very different. And I kind of found this as an easy way to learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So I started off doing that, and then from there recognised, well, actually, I wanted to grow my expertise in commercial, in design, and all of these things. Not necessarily saying I wanted to be a commercial manager or a designer, but at least be able to have a bit more of those conversations, mainly because I was getting frustrated of not being able to influence as much as I could do, or, sort of thought I should be able to do. And so from there, I shadowed a number of different colleagues in all sorts of different areas, just basically asking, can I join and sort of learn from them? Most people are quite flattered if you ask to understand more of their world. So I've never really found any opposition to that. Subsequently, in about 2017, took on the carbon manager role. So I'm not necessarily a carbon, I haven't got a carbon management degree by background, but I really found it an interesting tool. I'll admit I do like an Excel spreadsheet, which probably helps for this type of role, I'm not going to lie. But I saw it as an opportunity to help translate an environmental impact into not just carbon emissions, but translate that into a cost element and etc. And so it was an easy way to help convert some of the business cases that I was looking to drive forward, just through the carbon angle, I suppose. So I took on that role to be able to experience and grow that aspect. That also came along with the legal and voluntary disclosure aspect, so learning how corporate governance disclosures, how they can be used to drive change, etc. Some of the frustrations that go with that, but yeah. And then from there grew what was a very reporting role, to be fair, into a carbon management role that was far more open and focused on the strategy aspects of what we were doing and driving change across the business. And then last year took on the climate change role, which is building on the carbon management role, but as I mentioned before, expanding on the fact that actually recognising that climate change is bigger than addressing greenhouse gas emissions, to ensure that actually we were doing justice to the topic and had a true framework that set that out. So yeah, in that time I've actually taken commercial. Sorry, I got you up there, but I did mention I have dabbled in a number of different teams. I did a commercial secondment for 6 months to understand more, well, just basically understand better how contracts work, how we make money, where was my biggest opportunity to influence on that type of thing, etc.
And the key thing that stands out there is getting all of that different areas of knowledge, because across different disciplines, because the environment is so wide spanning in terms of what it can cover, what everything that an organization does potentially has an impact on the environment. So if you have an idea of how those different departments and disciplines work, then surely it's going to help you with what you do in your job. Or if you're aiming to get to that point later on in your career, at least you then have a grounding of those experiences to work from.
Yeah.
So, outside of your work with Costain, so you also have a couple of other positions, I believe, one of them being the chair of the Carbon Champion Review Panel with the Institution of Civil Engineers. What do you do in that kind of a role?
So the ICE started, I think it's about probably 2 years ago, their carbon project. So it was quite clear they wanted to help address and help guide the industry and what we needed to do, etc. And part of that, and it's kind of an overwhelming piece of feedback that I'm sure many have heard, and it's not going to be a surprise to anyone, was around actually we really need to get better at learning and implementing, integrating best practice. There is a kind of, certainly in the engineering space, a little bit of reinventing the wheel, or not really industrializing innovation. Innovation tends to stick in this bubble and we don't get to that next step. And so the ICE was very keen, and I was quite vocal in sort of helping shape that, but quite keen to say, well, actually, we don't just want a repository of best practice, which is brilliant, but actually want to drive change. And so to set up a program that would encourage people to actually adopt these practices, demonstrate that they've been adopted, and continually drive on that. And so as part of that program, there was the Carbon Champion program that was set up by the Institution of Civil Engineers, which essentially is a program that looks to recognise individuals or projects or teams that have achieved tangible examples of reducing carbon. So be that a really early design stage or even concept, all the way through to delivery. The idea being we weren't looking to just promote great ideas. It was really looking to showcase what people have done. And so my role within that was to help set up the structure of, okay, well, how do we assess everyone? How do we make this comparing apples with apples? So, and this is not just me on my own to reassure. We have a whole peer group from the industry. We've got academics and all sorts involved in shaping what would be our sort of line in the sand as to what cuts the mustard in terms of being a carbon champion, and how do we use that to then drive additional change. So I help coordinate, set up and structure that approach for the ICE and ensure that program gets delivered and recognised.
That sounds like a valuable thing to be involved in. I think I need to talk to you about that particular group from a Society for the Environment point of view. I was the driver behind setting up our employer champion program, for example, and which is also to do with professional registration and how employers help to develop their environmental teams, and being able to put the structure together to make sure, again, comparing apples with apples. How do you do that with a 10-person consultancy and a Costain or someone like that? It's quite tricky to do that, but all of them deserve the recognition for what they do. It's an interesting avenue to go down. Are you, in terms of getting involved in that kind of thing, obviously this one in particular was with ICE, are you a member of ICE, or did you have to be, or?
No, so I am not an engineer. I know no one is perfect, guys, but no, I'm not an engineer by background. So what it does show is it was more my eagerness to help shape this, but the ability to be able to frame and structure what we needed to do. I don't need to be an engineer to help advise and structure these aspects. So no, I think certainly similar to what Society for the Environment and certainly IEMA have been promoting, is that actually diversity in teams, actually it's bringing different disciplines together. So a number of the individuals in that peer group are all sustainability experts, not necessarily all engineers. And I think that is what brings actually the richness to this. So we all have very different views of seeing the world or how we look at different applications, and it's really that discussion that's actually quite fruitful. But so no, I'm not. I've got
just interested. No, the reason I ask is just if people listening to this or watching this wanted to be involved in that kind of thing, that's a barrier that isn't there potentially. So it's
no, not at all. So we've made the program accessible to everyone as well. So you do not have to be a member of the ICE to apply to this, and that is very true for anyone looking to get involved in some of these projects as well. And I'm just an example of that. But yeah, definitely, it's the idea is, and I think, again, recognising that engineers alone won't solve this problem. So actually it's making sure that everyone is involved and able to be involved in order to help join all these dots together and drive that progress.
Yeah, quite right. Interestingly, the 2020 winner of the Registrant Newcomer of the Year was, what was he? I think he was a rising star, presidential rising star of some description at ICE as well. Wonder if there's a trend there. Interesting. Moving back a few years, not too many years, I'm sure, but why did you choose the profession to go towards the environmental side of your career? So
I know this is going to sound cheesy, and I do apologise in advance for those who do find it cringy, but it is, anyone who knows me will tell you, it is sadly it is the truth. I've always wanted to make a difference. Didn't necessarily know how, and even today I've got an idea, but I wouldn't say, set in stone, I know what job I want and what roles, etc., because probably a lot of the jobs that I will take on probably don't exist yet. But I've always been very driven by that, and that's from quite a young age in that aspect. And then throughout sort of my educational sort of years, trying to honing in on those types of things, of understanding, medical was at one point an interest, etc., and then actually went down the route of biology and things like that. And And then so I think I've always had an interest in it. I'm quite outdoorsy by nature. I like all of that. I grew up by the sea, so I think I've probably always had a link to the environment in that sense anyway. And I genuinely just thought I found there was so much opportunity to be able to do better than what we were currently doing, and I was quite keen to try and be part of that. I thought it was I find it quite fulfilling and rewarding in that sense. How I get into that, I was still quite unsure at the time. And then my logic, and this is just my logic, was that actually, okay, if I wanted to make the difference, this is probably my efficiency streak, it is in terms of I like doing things where I could maximize exactly what I'm going to get, I guess. So if I was going to try and make a difference, I wanted to try and make a difference in some of the industries that probably needed to change the most. And so therefore, I've worked in agriculture, I've dabbled a bit in fashion, my personal, outside of sort of my current roles at the moment, I've always taken an interest in that. And so industry, engineering, construction have always been environments that I've worked in because there was such an opportunity to drive a change at big scale. I also think I'm quite a visual person, so I think I like being able to see genuine, tangible sort of changes, if that makes sense. So that's probably subconsciously a reason I've gone into those industries. But yeah, so the draw was to genuinely be able to not just make a small impact, but, you know, potentially make a huge impact, not just on me or my life, but on society. And again, I find that amazing that there is an opportunity to really shape actually, you know, how people are going to live without even knowing that you helped shape their life potentially. So that's always been an interest for me.
Perfect. Did you have any particular influential people when you were growing up that kind of took you towards that area, or is it very much a self-driven thing?
I think by nature I'm a little bit inquisitive, but no, certainly I've had a number all throughout, friends, family, but also some of my quite early young teachers. I've always been encouraged, you know, the worst you can do is try. And so I never really saw it as, okay, well, actually, and my parents would always encourage me. There was an opportunity. I mean, I hit the job market smack bang in the middle of the recession in France. I wouldn't say that environmental careers were massive at the time, but it didn't really stop me from not trying it, because I suppose I'd had the ability, and a number of quite previous managers, actually one of my line managers when I was working throughout university was amazing, just saying, well, the worst you can do is try. And so, you know, if it doesn't work out, we find another route or you'll find something else. And so that's the logic around it, was really in shaping that and not putting any barriers in the way in that sense. So actually, you know, not putting it on a pedestal that I want to do this, exactly that. So it took away the pressure of achieving a certain thing, but I knew that I could live with not achieving it if I tried. I think I'd probably be kicking myself if I didn't. And so that was probably the key one. A lot of people just very much fueling on well, there's no harm in trying, at least, and doing the best you can.
Well, there's a lot of wise words there, and I hope a lot of people listen to that.
Thank you.
I'm going to go on to the fact that you're a chartered environmentalist now. Why not? We're on a Society for the Environment podcast. So you became a chartered environmentalist 2020, I think, which then allowed you to apply for the or to be nominated for the Registrant Newcomer of the Year award. Why did you become a chartered environmentalist, and what does it mean to you?
I think there was a number of different things as to why I was wanting to do it. One of them was, as much as I find it a bit of a cringy experience, and I'm sure other people do as well, when you have to write about yourself, and that self-reflection activity is actually, it sounds really simple, but actually it's a lot harder than it could seem. So I think part of it was I was quite keen to build my credibility in a professional space and having that recognition and being chartered to be able to demonstrate it. And part of it was also I wanted the challenge of being able to do that, because actually I do recognise the value in it and wanted to do it that way. And then another part was actually it was a great way of learning more about myself, not necessarily things like, you know, what you're comfortable in and what you're doing, but the areas that I needed to improve on. You know, writing through the application, actually you find you've got sections where you have loads more examples compared to certain areas, and I think it was a quite humbling way of being able to identify, or actually, where do I need to potentially I could do more, I need to drill into that more. So it was kind of an opportunity to use sort of grow myself as well as understanding. So it's kind of multiple facets as to why. But
and with those areas that you felt like you needed to improve, were Costain able to help you with finding those opportunities, or did you just look a bit deeper into your previous roles and so on and find that actually I have done those, I just need to articulate that onto the application?
Yeah, no, some of it was actually it was twofold. So one of the reasons the commercial secondment, or I chose to sort of instigate that and set that up and was able to be integrated into those teams, was building on the back of, whilst I probably had sufficient amount of experience to give a bit of an example, recognise that actually there was a lot more I could do, which could help with then my influencing sort of skills and all of that opportunity. So that came about from understanding and unpicking my application. And then other parts of it was also really discussing my submission or my application with other people, my line manager, colleagues, peers, who pointed out stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have linked as being, oh, well, actually, that enables you to demonstrate communication or whichever trait it was, so, or competency it was. So that was really helpful as well. So it's a bit of both. But yeah, it has certainly shaped what I've taken on forward, or projects that I've helped support based on what I identified.
Makes a lot of sense. And as mentioned, that allowed you to be nominated for the Registrant Newcomer of the Year award. And this is not going to help you with your feeling sheepish about this possibly, but I'm going to ask a question anyway. So for those who don't know, the award is designed to basically celebrate those who have really hit the ground running since achieving professional registration with the Society for the Environment, in Lara's case, Chartered Environmentalist registration. So what did that recognition mean to you, apart from being reasonably cringy?
It was, I can't deny it is very humbling. It was really quite a proud moment. It definitely outweighs all of the highs and the lows, and sort of when you do feel like actually you're not making as much progress. It was, I think, for me, a real testament of sort of endorsing, and actually, you've made some great effort. It is being recognised. I wasn't doing things. So I think from my perspective, just a personal pride thing, massively grateful. It also was a significant opportunity to sort of thank everyone else that had helped me get there, because I am definitely, a huge amount of where I am, what I've been able to achieve is through helping and working with others as well. So I think that was really quite a nice testament to be able to recognise everybody else in the process. So yeah, a little bit cringy to always see yourself on a screen, but as much as you are still quite happy to do so.
Well, congratulations once again. You're a very deserving winner. And you've given quite a lot of inspiration during this talk already, but what would you say to others thinking about a career in the environment, or indeed progressing towards Chartered Environmentalist registration?
So I'd say, from a career perspective in environment, don't get hung up on a specific role or a specific topic necessarily. If you can't get into it, there are multiple ways of trying to drive change. There is no one solution. What is right for me might not necessarily be right for you. My job titles didn't exist until I took on those roles quite recently. So, there's always going to be potentially the exact role of what you want might not exist. Doesn't mean you can't shape it. So I wouldn't, don't take no for an answer, but essentially there are multiple ways of trying. If one avenue isn't suited, then maybe another one is. Don't be shy to reach out and branch out into other disciplines as well. So actually, whatever the industry, getting to know your commercial, your procurement, your design teams, whatever it might be, plays a massive part in actually you being able to drive change in your area to influence those people. So I think the more you're able to learn from others, not just the technical expertise, but other disciplines that you'd think potentially are unrelated, the greater and the more rounded you'll be and the easier it is. In terms of the chancellorship, don't get overwhelmed. Actually, I found the hardest part was trying to find what I thought would be relevant examples for each competency. Have a conversation with your friends, your line managers, whoever it is. They don't necessarily need to understand that, even if they're not in the world of environment, being able to explain the competencies and you explaining what you do on a day-to-day, actually just talking to someone and talking them through really helped me certainly pull my ideas onto a page and think of things that I wouldn't necessarily have probably thought of had I done it all in isolation. So yeah, for me, it's very much branch out as much as possible. And probably the last one, this is valid for both. Don't be shy to reach out to other individuals in the network who work in completely different spheres. So I'm on a mentor program and work with a colleague who's an NG lead in the NHS, so a world I know very little about, but learn a huge amount from him. Sure, hopefully vice versa. But there are a lot of challenges that are similar that you can really tap into other people. So yeah, don't be shy to branch out and see what other people are doing, and reassured no one knows all the answers, so no one will expect you to either.
Good advice indeed. And that mentoring program that you're involved in, is that an IEMA thing, or is that elsewhere?
That is the ED mentoring program, actually.
ED, okay, nice, excellent. I've certainly found mentoring very useful, and I know a lot of people do, and a lot of people use it for the Chartered Environmentalist application through the likes of IEMA and various other professional bodies. Well worth it. Now, you can take this in any direction you like, but what's next for you? Not necessarily today.
Well, it'll come as no. It'll come as no surprise that I want to make the biggest difference possible. So I suppose my next role, or my next sort of step, is trying to figure out how do I drive that the current sphere of influence to be even bigger and to drive change on an even greater scale. I've recently undertaken some courses in sustainable finance and all of that to understand better actually this is just my interest. I find the topic interesting. I know this might be a bit strange for some, but I genuinely find it interesting. But also my logic is that actually being able to shape where capital goes, the flows of where the money is being invested, can really help then influence actually the downstream impacts of what projects we inherit, things like that. So looking to be able to get involved at those earlier stages to help shape policy, finance, all of those structures. So that's just probably a space that I'm looking to sort of grow more expertise in. Do I want to become a banker? To reassure, no, not necessarily. I am looking to influence potentially what bankers do or that type of thing, if that makes sense. So yeah, trying to just drive a change on an even bigger scale than I currently do, I guess.
Still broadening
and help others
do
that as well.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah.
Good. Well, what you've just said there links into what I was thinking about mentioning a moment ago, actually, because in terms of that broad range of skills that environmental professionals have, there are chartered environmentalists working in sustainable finance. To being able to connect with those people, to share knowledge for someone like yourself is really useful. And the reason I was going to go mention that is because as a starting block, if you're a chartered environmentalist or a registered environmental practitioner or a registered environmental technician, there is a LinkedIn group. If you wanted to go on there, ask for help, ask for support, ask if there's anyone, for example, in green finance that is happy to talk to you about the ins and outs of how that might work and how that might link into your career. It's fair to say, and we mentioned this already, that environmental professionals are very motivated and very happy to share their knowledge. So it's a good way of learning. So I have one last question, which is a question we ask every guest on EnvCast. And that is, if you were able to influence world leaders for a day, what would be the first thing you would go for in terms of a topic and trying to change their behaviors or influence them in certain ways?
Probably asking if I could come back every day to influence, but that's second to that option. I think my request would be very much accountability and the assurance and accountability. So there's been, and the reason I say this is because there's been a huge amount of drive for organisations or individuals or people to sign up, and we made all these commitments, and this is true across pretty much every industry, and which is brilliant. But the bigger part of the two is making sure that we follow through on those commitments. I mean, there is a reason everyone's normally given in on their New Year's resolution by March. So, the intention is brilliant. I'm quite keen to see that we actually realise those intentions. So for me, I think accountability of making sure that what organisations have committed to is actually being followed through, not searching and asking for more commitments to other or additional things. So yeah, it sounds very simple, but I think that would drive quite a bit of change.
Simple, but I imagine it would be quite effective, as with many things. So That leads us to draw the podcast to a close. So a huge thank you to Lara for joining us today. It's been very insightful, and I hope everyone who's listening has stuck with us and has learned quite a lot. So thank you very much for that, Lara. And also a note to say, I think in terms of the background noise, we've done quite well. So there's a positive today.
I think so too.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you for listening to today's EnvCast episode. If you'd like to hear more about the Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner, or Registered Environmental Technician registrations, please look at our resources available at socenv.org.uk. Alternatively, visit our YouTube channel, where you can find a variety of environmental webinar series, registration guides, and various insights from registrants themselves. Just search for Society for the Environment on YouTube. To keep up to date with what's going on at the Society for the Environment, you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @SocEnv_HQ, and via LinkedIn by searching for Society for the Environment with SocEnv in the brackets. We will release a new EnvCast episode on the first Wednesday of each month. So if you're interested in future podcasts, please do subscribe. You can subscribe and review through a variety of platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Castbox. Thank you very much for listening or watching on YouTube. We look forward to seeing you at the next episode next month.